Hi, everybody. This week, David, the viewer, suggested I talk a little bit about the verbs peer, peek, and peep. And in his original comment to me, he noted that as he was looking at translations and definitions, he was instructed through one source to use any of these, that they really have the same meaning. So I promised him a fourth video as we've talked about these different verbs to talk a little bit more about what's different about these verbs. So you probably have noticed this week, if you've watched all three videos, that peer, peek, and peep all share this similar meaning. And so I would say they're connected by this idea that we're looking at something, we're viewing something, right? So these three verbs do have that strong similarity, right? We're talking about an action with our eyes. But as we think about how to use these verbs as we're speaking or as we're writing, I would encourage you to think a little bit about how long you're describing the action of looking at a thing or looking at a person. Now, if you're thinking about describing something that's being done for a longer period of time, that might be a good time to use the verb peer. Particularly when someone really has to look at something because they're trying to understand it, they're concentrating a great deal, or maybe there's some sort of difficulty in finding or identifying something. Okay, so that's my first piece of advice, and I've got a couple sentences here that maybe could help us understand it. So the first example says, Mary peered at the engraving on the back of the watch. Okay, so maybe you've seen this in different forms of jewelry where letters are etched sort of inside of a piece. So here it might be that something's very small or it's written in a way that's maybe a bit unusual to Mary, right? So she's really concentrating, maybe trying to understand the words that have been engraved. Here's a second example. Jim forgot his glasses, so he peered carefully at the form he was being asked to sign. Okay, so again, we can kind of picture someone really trying to concentrate. Here, it's maybe because he's struggling to see and understand what it is he's filling out. Now, as we continue to look at these verbs, you may have noticed this week that many of the definitions, as we explained peek and peep, use the phrase a quick glance, right? That's kind of a short look. Something else these two verbs share in common is that many times these actions are being done in a secretive manner. So we're trying to look at something without others noticing that we've looked. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple more examples. The students peeked at the answers in the back of the book before the teacher checked their papers. Okay, and another sentence, they peeked at the ridiculous reality show to see what everyone had been talking about. So in both of these sentences, if I read them or I heard somebody say them, I would be thinking of short looks, right? So in the first example, the students didn't spend 30 minutes or an hour looking at the answers back in the book, right? These were quick, short glances before their teacher could see them doing this. The second sentence, someone is talking about watching a TV show, a reality show here. And what this is telling me, or if I heard someone say this, I'm not thinking they watch for 30 minutes or an hour, or maybe they watch several episodes again and again, right? We call that binge watching, right? It was like, I'm going to watch a little bit and see why people are talking about this, but I'm not going to do it for an extended period. Okay. I've got one more note here that I think is really important. So if we are talking about someone's action of looking at something they aren't supposed to see, again, we tend to use the verbs peek and peep. But I'm going to tell you there's a much stronger negative connotation to the verb peep. In fact, sometimes we see it to describe illegal activities where someone is looking at or watching someone else in a very private way or in private moments, and they're not supposed to be doing it. As I looked for lots of examples, that was something I saw again and again. And as I thought about it, like, yeah, that is something that sort of jumps out. So I thought also that it might help to kind of challenge you maybe a little bit to think about which verb out of our three that we've been using all this week, peer, peek, and peep, would you use in these 4 sentences? So let's look at the first one. Did you blank at your gifts that were hidden in the attic? Okay, so now in some of these, you might want to argue with me about what the best choice is. But think of that, gifts. They had been hidden, right? So we're maybe thinking about that secretive look. And while maybe we didn't want someone else to look at or see these things, I also wouldn't say that this raises or rises to a level where we're talking about a crime, right? They haven't done anything illegal here. So in sentence number 1, I think you would hear a lot of people use the verb peek. Did you peek at your gifts? Right? Did you take kind of a quick look? What am I getting? Right? Before a certain birthday or maybe before a certain holiday. Now let's take a look at number 2. The man was arrested after a neighbor saw that he had blank into a woman's bathroom. Okay. What do you think fits here? Okay. So I know I've mentioned crime as we've explained a couple times here. This is a good example of when you're going to either hear or see the verb peeped be used, right? So that should be a private space. No one should have that space invaded, and clearly here in the United States and many other places, this is an illegal action, right? To try and watch and spy, and particularly in a very private place like a bathroom. Now let's look at sentence number 3. The students gathered at the observatory and blanked into the night sky to identify constellations. This is different kind of groupings of stars. So, what verb do we think fits here? I hope you were thinking peered, right? This would be one of those long looks, right? Maybe they have to kind of think about, wait, which direction is this? Could it be this particular group of stars, or is it some particular other group? Maybe you've heard of Big Dipper, Little Dipper, and there are many other constellations out there. Let's try one more. She blanked at the sun during the eclipse, but she didn't look long enough to hurt her eyes. Okay? So some context clues in that sentence, right? Didn't look long enough, right? So here we might be talking about a short, quick glance. So again, you might hear peeked used in a sentence similar to this. So they're taking a short glance. If you were in North America last spring, you might have heard a lot about the eclipse that took place, along with many warnings. Do not look directly at the sun during this because it can have long-lasting negative impacts on one's eyesight. Again, I want to say a special thank you to the viewers for always sharing so many great ideas, telling me what you want to learn more about. I hope this week's videos, and this one in particular, helps you better understand the verbs peer, peek, and peep. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.